All right, we begin with the blockbuster news out of New York City today. Sean Diddy Combs may not be spending the rest of his life in prison, but he is not going home tonight with his family. Instead, he's going back to his fellow inmates in Brooklyn after a judge just denied his request for bail. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Let's go live right outside the courthouse because Sean Combs' defense team is holding a press conference. Let's listen in.
Conspiracy, and he will be able to sleep well at night knowing that. Okay, thank you to everyone. I appreciate you.
What did you think about the bail decision?
Jason, you guys can.
All right. Well, it looks like that press conference literally just ended. They were taking a victory lap, all the lawyers saying Sean Combs was not guilty of sexual assault or of sex trafficking. And that is exactly what the jurors said. We had heard from Mark Garagos moments earlier. He was a consultant for the Combs defense team. He didn't care that the judge just denied bail. He said the rapper is simply relieved to have the verdict up. Let's go back to the news conference live. We've got the signal back.
Thanks, Sean, for the privilege of this opportunity to help him clear his name. After all, with the Southern District coming after him, guns blazing, it really is a testament to the fact that when you get a fair trial and a jury of your peers listens to the evidence, they will do the right thing. And I just want to say again how proud I am to be part of this team and to have helped Sean get a just verdict.
Are you going to appeal the minute? Guys, can anyone share what Mr. Combs wanted to say in court when he raised his hand during the bail hearing? Does anyone know? No.
Mr. Nicholas, can you talk about the bail decision and the judge using defense's own words during trial about violence?
I'm not going to talk about the bail decision because it's still a pending, unresolved matter. And I don't think we're going to take any more questions. I want to thank you all. You guys have been so diligent and dedicated. I pass you guys in the rain. I walk by you in the sun, and you're all out here every day. I just want to thank you. But I don't think we're going to take any questions.
Can you take us through the ups and downs of the day, though? Because Mr. Combs got acquittals on the major charges. Maybe thought he could go home tonight, and then was told he couldn't.
So a lot of these things are still in process. I mean, the one thing I'm going to leave you with this. We are not nearly done fighting. We are just getting started. To win this and to defeat the prosecutors from the Southern District of New York takes effort from beginning to end. Today was a major step in the right direction, but we fight on, and we're going to win, and we're not going to stop until he walks out of prison a free man to his family. Thank you all for coming.
All right, we just heard from Sean Diddy Combs' defense attorney. Very happy with the verdict, even though the jury did find their client guilty of 2 felony counts of prostitution. So they found him not guilty. They found him guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, but they acquitted him of the top charges, and that's why those lawyers are so happy. The top charges were racketeering and sex trafficking. It is a big win for the music mogul, who faced life in prison if he was convicted on those other serious counts. But despite the acquittal on those serious charges, he is guilty of these 2 more minor felonies. And the judge announced he will remain in jail until sentencing. The judge ruled that Combs was a danger to the community and has a history of violence behind closed doors. The women who testified against him in the trial had petitioned the court this afternoon, saying they were in fear if Combs were released. Combs and his family were hoping that he'd be walking out of jail right this moment and be on his way home for an Independence Day celebration. Those hopes were just dashed, and Combs faces time behind bars. The 2 prostitution convictions carry a maximum of 10 years each, a total of 20 if they were to run consecutively. But in their letter to the judge today, the prosecutors argued that the guideline range is 4 to 5 years. So that's what he's facing if the prosecution gets their way. The judge proposed a sentencing date of October 3rd and said that Sean Combs will get credit for the time he's already served behind bars. So far, that's about 10 months. Let's go right now to our NewsNation team, live for us outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. We've got NewsNation correspondent Marcus Espinoza and producer Tommy Cristaldi, who's been in that courtroom every single day of the trial. Marcus, first of all, what's it been like both inside and outside the courtroom? I hear it's been pandemonium.
Yeah, Elizabeth, good evening. And there's a lot to discuss between inside the courtroom, which he has been a part of a lot, and then outside as well. I don't know if you can tell, we'll wait for traffic to pass behind me, but there's still a very large crowd outside, and it's not just media members. But let's go inside first. When Sean Combs found out that he was not getting bail, reports were from WPIX, there, our sister station, local station here, is that he was genuinely shocked. Combs has been animated, you would agree, this entire trial, pretty much throughout, even getting a warning about addressing the jury, right? So animated to the very end for Sean Combs there as he found out that he's not going to walk out today, as you mentioned, and have a July 4th holiday with his family. So a shocked expression from him, that's worth noting. Another thing that happened inside, unrelated to the case or the trial, somebody actually inside the courtroom passed out unconscious. Emergency services were called, and then actually Mark Agnifalo's daughter came to that person's aid and helped out. They were wheeled out actually unconscious still. That was about a little bit more than half an hour, 45 minutes ago, but that caused a little bit of ruckus outside, but unrelated to Sean Combs or anybody related directly to the case there, but just worth noting if anybody saw that on X or anything like that. So inside, outside, I did live shots by the crowd there. It was crazy.
All right, Tommy, I'm going to get to you in a second, but Marcus, I know that when the verdict was announced, there were massive crowds outside, both people for and against Sean Combs. I was watching, and you actually had these supporters were arguing with each other. People were breaking out baby oil in celebration. It was, quite frankly, a bizarre scene.
A bizarre trial, I think, is the correct way to put it, right, Elizabeth? I think from start to finish for outside viewers and people really gathered outside. Some of the T-shirts people were wearing, I cannot repeat, on network television, and they were in support of Sean Combs. There was that. There was the arguing between people. We actually moved, my crew and I, to the side of the courtroom when there was a very large argument. Wouldn't call it a scuffle, but it was something that basically got cordoned off. Cops were bringing in barriers to basically stop other people from joining that. We got boxed in, my photographer and I, real quick. But yeah, it was a lot of that today, and it seemed to grow as the day went on, especially when it was a bit of a delay on finding out about the whole bail issue.
Okay. And we're looking at somebody holding a T-shirt saying a FRICO is not a RICO, referring RICO was the racketeering charges. That's just a little bit of, but the fact that supporters were even getting close to fistfights out there shows you a little bit of the passion and pandemonium outside the courtroom. Tommy, you've been in the courtroom the entire time. You happened to be leaving after the verdict was handed down, and you, by chance, got into the elevator, and Sean Combs' family got in right after you. Tell us about what happened.
Sure. So when the verdicts came down and the courtroom cleared out, my priority was getting downstairs. The main courtroom's on the 26th floor, so it's a long elevator ride. And I wanted to get out and get my notes out. And then I thought other journalists would be coming into the elevator behind me. That was not the case. It was Christian Combs and his girlfriend, Justin Combs and his girlfriend, Charlucci, the guy you just saw holding that T-shirt up, Fahim, who was a part of Diddy's security team. They all got in the elevator. The doors closed, and then the celebration began. They were jumping up and down. They were screaming. They were cheering, banging on the walls. Let's go. Diddy's free. Now, this was before we heard that he would not be coming home tonight. And they were planning a 4th of July party in Miami this weekend as if he was going to be there. They were saying, Christian said he was overjoyed. He couldn't wait to hug his father. But, of course, we've seen now that is not what is going to end up happening.
All right, Marcus Espinoza, Tommy Cristaldi. Tommy, great work there. Continuing the reporting, I would have been afraid the elevator was going to get stuck or something with all the jumping around you're describing. Thanks so much, guys. Let's bring in our legal experts now. Jesse Weber's a NewsNation legal contributor and a Law and Crime Network host. Nima Rahmani is a former federal prosecutor, and Robert Hirschhorn is an attorney and a jury and trial consultant. Great to have all three of you here. Nima, I'm going to start with you. The judge denied bail to Combs, saying he has a, quote, propensity for violence, and that he engaged in years-long violence and continues to be unable to follow the law, noting his last act of violence came after he knew he was under investigation. That's a scathing ruling by the judge, is it not?
It is, Elizabeth, and I'm as pro-prosecution as they come, but I think this was the wrong ruling by Judge Subramanian. The jury has spoken. The defense has a right to bail, in my opinion. If Combs were just charged of prostitution, which no prosecutor would do, every single judge in this country would give him some sort of bail. Now, I know the prosecution, they're trying to backdoor some of this evidence of force and coercion, and you can technically do that. Even acquitted conduct can come into sentencing. But look, you're a prosecutor. You got to take your loss and move on. I know this is the Southern District of New York. They're not used to losing. And look, I think Combs is a terrible human being, but as a prosecutor, you're supposed to pursue justice. You got to respect the jury verdict here. And this is nothing less than a complete and total loss. Prostitution was a layup, but in all the serious counts, the jury didn't believe the victims. They didn't even think that any of the racketeering acts happened, the bribery, the extortion, the arson. So I think Combs should be out on bail. I wouldn't be surprised if the defense files an appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't think they're going to be waiting till the October 3rd sentencing.
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
I think we heard Mark Agnifilo just say that the fight continues. That they are not going to just take this and wait until October 3rd for a sentencing. Jesse, we'll get to the jury verdict in a second, but I just one more question on the judge's ruling to keep him in jail pending sentencing. Did the defense lawyers' own language come back to haunt them? Because the defense lawyers, Combs' lawyers, admitted in both their opening and closing arguments that Combs beat women up.
Yeah, they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. They admitted that he basically engages in domestic violence because they were trying to make the point to the jury, yes, we're admitting the bad facts, but we're saying that is not a federal crime. The judge said, you admitted he's violent. One of the factors we have to determine, is he a danger to the community? And look, when you're doing a bail analysis, it's very different than anything else. You can include a lot more evidence, and there is a lot more leeway. It is on the burden for the defense to say that Sean Combs is not a risk of flight, that he's not a danger to the community. And clearly, as Nima was saying, while the circumstances might have changed and he was acquitted of the most serious charges, the factors didn't. And it's basically the same kind of bail analysis the judge was doing and prior judges were doing during the whole course of this criminal process.
Robert, the women who testified against Sean Combs at trial said they wrote letters to the judge this afternoon saying they remain afraid of him. But with this verdict, he's going to get out at some point in a year or maybe 4. It was up to, right?
Right. So look, they may have been afraid, but the system worked. I mean, prosecutors have to charge what the actual crime is. And Elizabeth, I've been coming on your show for a while now saying over and over, Frico, not Rico, that he's a swinger, not a trafficker. And that's exactly what the jury said. Listen, every single victim is going to be feeling the exact same way, but they got their voice heard. The jury decided the case. And now they've got to move on with their life. I mean, look, Diddy is a manipulative, condescending, arrogant, rich, famous abuser. He's a domestic violence guy. He's an asshole, but he's not charged with any of those things. What he was charged with, the jury convicted him on the Mann Act, that's the prostitution, and acquitted him of everything else.
Yeah.
It was the right verdict and a courageous jury.
Jesse, this means, you and I have been talking about this means the jury didn't believe Cassie and Jane when they said they were forced to do these things. They believed the text messages back then. They didn't believe their testimony now.
You know why it's surprising? You and I were talking about this yesterday. The jury came back with a jury question yesterday, and they basically asked for a repeat of testimony of 3 specific alleged instances of sex trafficking, one including the whole 2016 Intercontinental Hotel tape where Sean Combs was beating Cassie. And then shortly thereafter, they came back and said, we have a verdict as to these charges. And I said, I'm not convinced that he's going to be found guilty with respect to Jane, particularly because they didn't ask for a readback of testimony. There was a lot of great testimony with hers. But I was saying that quickly, they're probably going to find him guilty with respect to Cassie. And they didn't. And by the way, surprise, they were hung on racketeering. There's no way we can switch it. They come in today, and in an hour, they come back and say, we're not guilty. I would love to speak to the jurors and find out all the...
So would we all. Nima, are you surprised that they said that Cassie wasn't coerced, given the fact that there's an actual videotape of him beating her up and dragging her by her hair back to one of these freak-offs when she tried to get away?
I'm not surprised based on reading the tea leaves in this case. And look, I went on X yesterday, and I predicted this verdict. So let me tell you why. First of all, the cross-examination of Cassie with the emails and text messages over 2 days was brutal. There was a reason the defense kept playing the freak-off videos. Obviously, we didn't see him, but I'm just guessing that it shows Cassie Ventura seeming to enjoy herself sexually. And the defense originally asked for 2 weeks for their case in chief. Then they go to 2 days. Then they go to 30 minutes just reading text messages into the record. So they felt very confident. Now, when juror 25 on day one says, I can't deliberate, reportedly, that leads me to believe he's a defense juror. If he came out and said right away, I'm guilty, I don't think the jurors would have delivered that note to Judge Subramanian. So now you have at least one defense juror, and a quick verdict in these types of cases where there's a lot of evidence is usually a defense verdict.
Yeah.
I always said there's a path to racketeering that excludes the sex crimes, maybe extortion, maybe bribery, maybe kidnapping. So I knew that they were not guilty on sex trafficking. The only chance the prosecution had of success in this case is to prove the racketeering. They had some jurors yesterday. Maybe they slept on it and had a change of heart today. But the fact that the jury came back not guilty on the racketeering leads me to believe that this was nothing less than just a complete and total loss by the prosecution. This ended up being the most expensive prostitution trial in American history.
It's unbelievable.
But it's not a total loss. And the reason it's not a total loss is the jury did convict him of man acts. So while they didn't get the major charges, the prosecution did get the other ones. And everybody, listen, when you get that summons for jury duty, I always say this, don't try to get out of jury duty. Make sure you go down, become a juror, be part of the process.
All right, Robert Hirschhorn, Nima Rahmani, Jesse Weber, thank you all so much for your expert legal analysis. So Sean Combs was alleged to be running a criminal racketeering operation, yet he was the only participant in the alleged racket ever charged. What about the dozens of people surrounding him? His security guards, his stylists, his personal assistants, his PR people. What did they see and hear? Well, my next guest is in a position to know. He was Combs's publicist from 2002 to 2004. Rob Shooter wrote a stunning mea culpa about his time in Combs's inner circle in a column for The Hollywood Reporter, saying, what I was actually doing was managing a mirage. And like so many others in the entertainment ecosystem, agents, producers, stylists, executives, managers, I learned to look the other way. He discussed visiting Combs's home, saying he had to pass through a metal detector, writing, at Diddy's house, it was like airport security. That's when the little voice inside me whispered, this isn't normal. I ignored it. There were guns everywhere, big guys with blank expressions who tracked your every move. I would overhear Combs on the phone whispering to high-ranking law enforcement like they were old friends. If he needed a favor, he'd make one call, and boom, it was done. Rob Shooter joins us now. Rob, that was an astonishing essay that you wrote. You were Combs's publicist for years. You say you never saw any of this alleged behavior.
Yeah, I didn't, and I've watched this trial very, very carefully, but I did want to ask myself the big questions. Did I not see it, or did I want to not see it? And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. We've all had a terrible boss. We've all had a boss who has not treated us very well. We've all had a boss who's done awful things, but does it cross that line, and does it become illegal? And I think we found out today by this verdict that no, that is not the case, at least with the major crimes that he was accused of here. I was saying for a long time, Elizabeth, that as shocking as today is, it's maybe not surprising. Puff has been in many trickier positions before. He seems to always slip out some way, and I think he has again today.
You write that you actually learned to look the other way, to ignore the red flags. You wrote, it's astonishing to see what we fail to see when fame is in the room. You ignored all the signs that something more sinister might be going on. What were the signs?
Yeah, when I wrote that, I was really talking to the jury, and I understand what it's like to be around celebrities and how intoxicating that is. There was things around Puff that were just not normal. I represented other big stars, Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, Alicia Keys. I never saw guns. I never had to walk through a metal detector. I never saw a bank quality counting machine in the living room.
A money counting machine.
It was a strange experience. I was a young guy at the time, it was 20 years ago, no excuse there, but it just was a different experience. But what I really wanted to get to, Elizabeth, and I think we saw this maybe happen today, fame is really intoxicating, and fame can make you look maybe the other way.
Yeah, the women who testified against Combs say part of the reason why they went along with what he asked them to do was his fame, was his power, and that they were afraid of him and what he could do. And I'm thinking about what you wrote about him on the phone with police like they were old friends.
Yeah, it was dangerous. It was scary. We saw what happened here. When people say, why did Cassie not try to leave? She did. We saw her on video, Elizabeth.
And we saw what happened.
When she tried to leave, absolutely. And so I'm stunned at this verdict. Your panel before, who are legal experts, I am not. They do not seem to be quite stunned by it, but I'm actually absolutely shocked. What I do know, though, now is that moving forward, even if Puffy does walk out of jail, which I think he will one day, his life is forever changed. He will never be invited back to the Met Ball. He will never get to the key to the city. All the things that he used to love about being a celebrity, a lot of those now are gone. Don't worry, he's got a lot of money. He'll still live a very good life. But a lot of the perks, a lot of the VIP treatment, it will never come back. Not after this tape. Not after this.
Really? Do you think so, Rob? I don't know. I think, as you point out in your essay, by the way, it's a mea culpa essay. You say, I was intoxicated by the fame. I didn't listen to that little voice saying something's not right here. But there are plenty of others who are willing to step up where you have stepped out and who might be intoxicated by he's very, very famous. He's very, very rich. He might not be very, very powerful in the music or the fashion world, but I'm not sure he agrees with that assessment. I think he thinks he is.
Oh, he wouldn't. After what's happened today, he now thinks he's back on top. He thought he was going to walk out of this courthouse today. I'm sure he's terribly disappointed that he's going to be there a little longer, not for life, though, but he will walk out that door maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, but he will walk out, and I promise you, he will try to have a comeback. I had reporting that they were already planning a party, how tone deaf, a party to celebrate in Miami. That party looks like it's going to go ahead without Puffy, but one day he's going to walk out and he's going to try really hard to rise again like a phoenix.
Rob Shooter, it is an amazing essay. I encourage everybody to Google it and read it because it's a very interesting insight and an indictment of our celebrity culture and what we fail to see sometimes when we are around people that rich and that famous. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
All right, coming up for us on America's fastest growing cable channel, we turn to our other top story today. Bryan Kohberger pleads guilty to killing 4 Idaho college students. So what happens now? I'm going to speak live to our Brian Enton outside the courthouse in Idaho, as well as the state's former attorney general and a former FBI profiler on Bryan Kohberger and what makes him possibly do what he does. Plus, what do the attorneys for some of Sean Diddy Combs' alleged victims think about today's jury verdict? I'll speak live with Gloria Allred and get her reaction in a bit. All right, to more breaking news, this time out of Boise, Idaho, where after 2.5 years of claiming his innocence and even pointing the finger at others, Bryan Kohberger has now admitted he is guilty. He admitted it was he who brutally murdered 4 University of Idaho students, stabbing them to death in Moscow, Idaho in November of 2022.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
Did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
Did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Now, these guilty pleas come just weeks before his criminal trial was supposed to start. He is now facing life in prison without the possibility of parole, no death penalty. and some members of the victims' families are not happy with those guilty pleas. For more on that, let's go live to Bryan Enton, who's in Boise, Idaho. Bryan, what are we hearing from the families? Some of them were in favor of those guilty pleas, some not.
Yeah, half of them were not happy with the plea deal. Half of them said that they are okay with it. They are ready to move on. But you played some of what happened in court. I mean, I was sitting right in there, Elizabeth. I was sitting right behind Bryan Kohberger's parents. And it was sort of surreal to just hear him. I mean, it went on and on and on. You played a little clip, but they kept asking him questions over and over again, having him admit to these just gruesome murders, saying, are you the person who went in to 1122 King Road and stabbed to death Kaylee Gonzalez? And they would go through each victim, and they did it several times. And every time he was just so stone cold, Elizabeth. I watched him the whole time. There was no emotion on his face. There was not even a little bit of emotion, and he just kept saying yes, almost like he was just answering like test questions or something. And this went on and on and on, and you can imagine it was very difficult for the families. They were emotional in the courtroom. I was also looking at Bryan Kohberger's parents. They weren't crying, but they looked sad and upset. They showed emotion. Their son was showing no emotion. Outside, Kaylee Gonzalez's father, Steve Gonzalez, he chose not to go in, frankly, just because he was so livid. He walked his family to the door, and then he left. But this is what he said outside, Elizabeth.
We didn't agree on any of it. He only negotiated with the murder of our children. That was the only person that he negotiated with. He didn't give us the courtesy to negotiate with us. He would pretend. He could have just pretended and then lied, but he didn't even pretend. He basically said, your guys' input isn't needed.
And we did get some new details about the crimes. There was one part of the hearing where the prosecutor, he actually choked up when he was doing this. He read through some of what they discovered during their investigation. They said that Bryan Kohberger parked up behind the house, that he walked down through the woods, that he went in through a kitchen door, that he first went up to the 3rd floor and stabbed to death Kaylee Gonzalez and her best friend Madison Mogen. And they believe that those two were the targets and that he was going to leave after that. They didn't say why they know that, but they said that that's what they believe. But that when he was going downstairs, he encountered Xana, the other roommate, that he encountered her and then stabbed and killed her, and then also killed her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, while he was sleeping in the bed. Elizabeth?
All right, Bryan Enton, so striking to see the prosecutor choking up in tears while reading what happened, and the killer standing there just saying, yep, I did it. Unbelievable. Bryan Enton reporting live from Idaho. Thank you. Joining us now is former Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor of Idaho, David Leroy. He's also a criminal defense attorney. So, sir, were you surprised by prosecutors taking this guilty plea? As we just heard, the father of one of the victims is very angry, said he was only notified of it at the very last minute and really wanted a trial.
No, I was not actually surprised. There was one moment in time when this could happen, and it is now. We're on the courthouse steps. Jury selection is about ready to begin. We're looking at a 3-month trial and 15 years of appeals. So the maximum pressure is on the prosecutor to rethink, if he wishes, that decision on the death penalty. And the only solution that he could have accepted was a maximum plea to all counts, maximum sentences agreed to, no possibility of seeking any reduction, and all appeals waived. So in a sense, it's surprising. In another sense, this was the only time it could have happened.
Why do you think, though, prosecutors agreed to this plea deal or offered this plea deal? Were they unsure they would win?
No, I think, as was articulated today in the courtroom, it's a very strong scientific, circumstantial case, and it kept getting stronger. Just last week, the judge threw out the alternate perpetrator possibilities for the defense, so that further put a nail in the likelihood that this would be a conviction. But the prosecutor has to weigh all kinds of things, and this particular settlement is not only agreeable to half of the victim families, but it's also defensible and explicable in the community's best interest.
Listen, you can't ignore the fact that if he had been, convicted at trial and sentenced to death, which is they have the firing squad in Idaho, there would have been years of appeals. I mean, there would not have been this immediate justice that I think some of these families want.
Yes, and two of the families voted right now for closure and said and applauded and encouraged the prosecutor with very supportive and sensitive messages. The other two I can certainly understand have a biblical, moral approach to an eye for an eye, and that's explicable and understandable too. But on balance, this is the best result, even for those families, though they may not currently know it, that would have suffered through all those trials, those slings and arrows, and those 15 years of appeals.
And just very quickly, because we only have a few seconds left, will anybody force him to explain why he did what he did? Can the judge force him at sentencing to do that?
Judge can't force him to say anything at sentencing, but he will once again have the opportunity to do so. However, the judge did mention that in addition to the standard 11-page plea agreement form, he has written a written statement of his version of the facts and signed that. At some point, that will become public.
All right, maybe we'll get some answers then. David Leroy, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us, sir. All right, coming up for us, does Bryan Kohberger actually think he's guilty? Or did he take the plea to avoid the death penalty? We'll dive into the psychology of a killer with a retired FBI special agent who led the behavioral analysis program, coming up. So Bryan Kohberger has now admitted that it was he who slaughtered those 4 college students in Idaho, but why he did so remains an enigma. What led him to commit those 4 murders in cold blood? Our next guest has spent his entire career studying the psychology of killers. Retired FBI special agent and chief of the behavioral analysis program, Robin Dreeke, joins me now. So you study people like Kohberger. I was so struck by his demeanor today in court. He walked in, he was confident, showed no emotion, almost shameless, really, in how he just said yes to all these questions, admitting that he killed these 4 kids.
Yeah, shame's an emotion, so he wouldn't feel shame because, as you said, Elizabeth, he is without emotion. He has not deviated from his baseline of what his behavior has been in the courtroom from the very first appearance he made a couple years ago now. He looks exactly the same. As Brian Entin said a while ago, it looked like he was answering test questions, and that's exactly the way he approached this entire thing, as a study of a test of something he is trying to do to try to get an emotional response. He described himself as emotionless years ago, and that's what we're consistently seeing in the courtroom. And one more point there, you had asked going into the break whether he thinks he's guilty. Guilty against an emotion. Does he know he did it? Yes, he knew he did it.
There's been a lot of speculation all along that he was a criminology student, that he was trying to commit the perfect crime. We know from the prosecution today in court that he stalked at least 2 of those girls for months and months, you know, driving past their house in the middle of the night. What does that tell you?
He knew exactly what he was doing, planned, calculated. Matter of fact, I believe he was probably surprised, as it was indicated when he was first arrested, that he was caught because he studied this so extensively. And his one failing, and thankfully for it, was that night sheet with the touch print DNA on that thumb snap, because without that, this would have been a near perfect crime that he would have gotten away with, potentially, just because he was so thorough in his prep work. And like we said, he was surprised and emotionless throughout the entire thing.
And then he goes back to his apartment and takes a selfie of himself with a thumbs up in the bathroom of his apartment. This sounds like a guy who, if he's not caught, would have killed again.
I definitely believe so. You know, when we're looking at serial killers, they have a pattern of behavior that they're trying to do to satisfy some fantasy and need they have. And that one selfie that you mentioned in that bathroom, it was the only time, and there's a few photos.
That he shows emotion.
Exactly. It's the first time we've seen anything. It was after it was taken right after the murder. So that's the only emotion he got. And so he's going to do that again to get that same kind of emotional response, most likely. So I definitely think it would have happened again had he not been caught.
Our Brian Entin was in court today, sitting right behind the Kohberger family. I found myself wondering about them, if they ever knew there was something off or wrong with their son, if anybody saw any warning signs. Do people like this have, you know, behavior that makes people suspicious around them?
So he definitely had a lifetime of what I call a behavior arc of really challenging behaviors and a lifestyle. You know, he battled with drugs for years. He battled with overeating. He battled with a lot of things, as he self-described as trying to do something to get emotional response. So it's not surprising he dabbled in drugs and all these things. And then you have parents, especially the father, that really tried to step in to help his son overcome those things, and very big part of his life, but shameless, unfortunately, not able to stop him from this path he put himself on.
Wow. Just a shocking end to the story, and I sure hope we get more information for the sake of those families who need answers. Robin Dreek, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise, Elizabeth, thank you.
All right, coming up for us, we're going to go back to our top story. The attorney for some of Sean Diddy Combs' accusers will join me live coming up after the break. Gloria Allred says the fight for justice is not over. That's coming up. All right, back to that bombshell verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. His family and supporters may be celebrating the outcome, the verdict from the jury, but that joy was cut short this evening as the judge in the case denied Combs bond while he awaits sentencing. And Combs isn't out of the woods yet legally on other fronts. Dozens of alleged victims, both publicly named and anonymous, have filed civil accusations against him, some going back years. We're talking rape, abuse, sexual assault, harassment, and more. Combs has denied all those accusations, and many of the allegations have already spawned civil lawsuits. It's likely more are coming. A number of those accusers are being represented by our next guest. Joining me now is attorney Gloria Allred. Gloria, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Elizabeth.
One women's rights organization called today's verdict, quote, a stain on the criminal justice system, and said it was an indictment of a culture in which not believing women and victims of sexual assault remains endemic. Do you agree with that?
No, not particularly. I mean, I'm an officer of the court. I'm licensed to practice in New York and California and D.C. I don't criticize jury verdicts. I seek to respect jury verdicts. Whether or not, if I had been on jury, would I have come to a different conclusion? Maybe. I didn't hear all of the evidence that they did in the courtroom. Having said all that, look, he was convicted of at least 2 felonies. He is a convicted felon as of this moment. Correct, he was not convicted of RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. He was not convicted, and he could have gotten life in prison for that. He was not convicted of sex trafficking. They would have had to find force, coercion, fraud.
Right.
I think that force was obvious from that CNN video that he was beating her and dragging Cassie. She's trying to get away from a freak off. They dragged her back. So I don't know how anybody could say she consented to be dragged back to a freak off. But I don't know what was going on in the jury's mind. I have no idea. And they found him not guilty on that. We'll see. Yes, he was denied bail today, and I'm very glad that he was, Elizabeth. I said actually prior to that decision by the court a few minutes earlier on CNN, I said I would hope that he would be denied bail because I represent a number of women, 2 of which have filed civil lawsuits. It took a lot of courage for them to file it. There's been a lot of fear of retaliation, and they overcame that fear. They filed a lawsuit. In addition, I represented others who have not filed civil lawsuits, but who did speak to law enforcement and the prosecution in this case, some of whom were listed as potential witnesses, and the defense knew who they were. So it took a lot of, they had to overcome their fear to talk to law enforcement.
Right, but explicitly about, Gloria, explicitly about this, Cassie Ventura, her lawyer, wrote to the judge this afternoon saying she opposed Combs getting out pending a sentence, saying he actually posed a danger to her and other witnesses who testified against him. Were any of the victims you represent concerned that they were in danger?
Well, I think they have been concerned even before they spoke to law enforcement, and that was important. But they overcame their fear, they found their courage, and they did speak to law enforcement anyway because they felt it was the right thing to do.
And how will
even the court pointed out today that he admitted, that his defense attorneys admitted that he has the propensity for violence.
Right.
That he is violent.
And how, very
So,
quickly,
you know,
how will today's criminal court verdict affect your civil litigation, if at all?
Well, probably not much, maybe in the court of public opinion somewhat, but because we have a lower burden of proof in a civil case, we only have to prove it by this much evidence, preponderance of the evidence, which is a lot less than the burden up there beyond a reasonable doubt. They've tried to dismiss our cases. They've been unsuccessful. We are litigating. We're going to be heavily going into discovery. We are going to be looking, for everything and anything that will help to prove our client's case, and we will proceed.
Gloria Allred, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Coming up, Chris Cuomo is talking about the verdict, of course, with 3 big guests. He'll join us next with the preview. All right, Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris is going to be speaking with Stephen A. Smith, Bill O'Reilly, James Carville, and Mark Garagos about the Sean Diddy Combs verdict. Were you surprised?
No, I was
weren't.
not surprised. I'll tell you what, this is one of those situations where this is why people don't trust government. Prosecutorial overreach. Do I like what Diddy is about and what he did? No, of course not. No more than I liked the behavior that was behind Trump's New York cases or Adams' New York case. But just because you don't like the behavior doesn't mean that it's a crime and doesn't mean that an allegation is enough. And that's what this was about.
Yeah.
That tape with Cassie shows us that Diddy is a guy that you don't want in your life, okay? He assaulted her. But to make it a federal case?
The jury ruled that it wasn't coercion. Doesn't that videotape show coercion? She was trying to leave one of those freak-offs. He chases her down the hall, beats her up, and drags her by the hair back to the hotel room. I don't know. If that's not coercion, what is?
I mean, look, it's worse than just coercion, right? It's an assault.
Right.
Under different circumstances, it could have even been an attempt to take her life. But no is the answer. The prosecution never even offered it as proof of that. In fact, they never offered it as proof of anything linked to the charges, and yet it was clearly the center of the case.
Right.
And that's what bothers me about it. It is easy and it is acceptable to condemn Diddy. I have no problem with you wanting to do that or anybody wanting to do that. But to say he committed a federal crime and then trying to make it into an organization of a criminal organization case is exactly why people don't trust these cases.
Well, it's going to be a great discussion. Have a great show.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.